While I was in the civil service in the Department for Transport, became a dad 8 years ago now. It was interesting for me because doing work around HR and change and people and family and gender, but then for me to have this actual real life experience at the same time. So when my daughter was born, she had an infection called Group B strep. 1 in 10 babies will pass away from the infection. 1 in 14 will have a very serious lifelong disability. So when she was born, she was grey, lifeless. They put her on my wife's chest and she didn't cry. They took her off, took her to the corner of the room, tried to resuscitate her. And I remember at the time feeling a sense of numbness, disbelief, feeling like I was watching a TV program, like this can't be happening. And just that sense of hopelessness and relying on people that I had met literally a few hours ago, hoping they can save my family's life. So we went into the neonatal intensive care unit with my daughter. My wife stayed to get treatment in the delivery room. And I remember going through these white walls in the hospital, and I just wanted to call my mum. And I think I was back in a kind of childhood state. So at this point, I'm kind of middle management level. I chair meetings. I do speaking in my job. I have a team. Went back into that, but I'm a shell of myself. We're trying to come to terms with what just happened, the most traumatic experience of our lives, and it feels like the world hasn't stopped. We just get back into it. So I started having panic attacks. I would be crying. I would be having insomnia. My wife was diagnosed with postnatal anxiety. Eventually, I was diagnosed with PTSD. And we started just generally writing articles about fatherhood. We brought in music and football in that to try and make it interesting. And then there was one day, me and my wife both had a day off work. And we were in a coffee shop in Harrow. And I was writing about being a dad, being a black dad. At the time, I was working compressed hours. I had my daughter every Friday. And I wrote this article. And my wife said, you should send that to The Independent. They respond back straight away and say, we love it. Can we publish it? By the time I got home from the coffee shop, it was on the front page of The Independent. And by the time I'd woke up the next day, it had been shared 20,000 times. And then a couple months later, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, had a baby. And he posted on Instagram a picture of him and his baby. And he's reflected on childbirth and his experience of watching childbirth. And that same editor said to me, Elliot, do you want to respond to this? The next day I woke up and my phone battery was low. I had loads of missed calls. I'm like, what have I done? Have I upset someone? What is going on? Why is everyone phoning me? I opened my phone. And Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, had seen the article and shared it and wrote some nice words on his Twitter. So that just amplified what we were doing even more so. And I would just say to everyone, if you've got something that you truly believe in and you're ready to take a personal sacrifice in regards to financial and time, because you believe in what you're doing so much, you're willing to take a sacrifice. Not just for you, but for your family as well. When you leave your job, it's not just you, it's everyone in your family that's going to potentially suffer if it doesn't work out. But if you're willing to do that because you believe in what you're doing so strongly, then give it a go. Because you might change the world.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Against All Odds. My name is Daniel Coker, your accidental podcaster.
Love it.
And our guest in the studio this week is Mr. Elliott Rae. Did I get the pronunciation right?
Yeah. Pretty easy name to say.
I know, you're one of the easier ones. Elliott is the founder of Music, Football, and Fatherhood, which is, he'll tell us a bit more about it. And he's an advocate for men's well-being and mental health in men. And he talks about things that were traditionally not very cool to talk about some years ago. So, Elliott, welcome to Against All Odds.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Incredible setup. I'm just interested and excited to get into the conversation. So thanks, Daniel, for having me.
We'll dive straight in. So tell us a bit about, tell our viewers a bit about your background, just to give us context, because you more or less came into this journey through some experiences that you had, traumatic experiences that you had. And I'll probably just give you the chance to just tell us a bit about your background and
Yeah.
how you came to be where you are today.
Before this episode starts, I'd like to ask a big favor. Your subscription means a lot to us because the bigger this platform gets, the bigger the guests get. So do me a favor, please click on the subscribe button and the bell notification so that you don't miss out on any future episodes. Now let's get back to this episode.
Yeah, so I'll start from the beginning. My parents came to the UK in the 60s from the Caribbean. My dad from Grenada and my mum from St. Vincent, and they met in Wembley.
Oh, okay.
Next to the stadium where I was brought up. I was born and grew up. A place called Sudbury Town in between Wembley and Greenford. And, you know, when I look back around my childhood, it was really happy. You know, my parents did a great job, I think, of shielding me and my sister from a lot of the negative things in the world. So for the large part, in my early childhood, I was able to be a child. And I guess getting older and doing the work I do and just experience, you realize that's a massive privilege, you know, to be able to be a child and enjoy yourself. I'm not saying we had loads of things. We didn't. My parents, my mum was a cashier in NatWest Bank. My dad started as a mechanic. He ended up kind of moving his way up in that field and becoming an assessor for apprentices for Ford. So we didn't grow up with a lot, but my parents were very good at saving and very good at helping us to be children. So upbringing was nice. I think when I got to secondary school, I went to Twyford High School in Acton, and that was really formative for, you know, for most of us. Yeah, our secondary school experience for me was very formative. I think I look back and I'm very thankful for that school because it was so diverse. Before diversity was even a term that we use, it was diverse.
Okay.
So you'd have some of the rich white kids that grew up in Ealing, you know, houses with like the high ceilings, the massive houses in West Ealing and Gunnersbury. But you'd have kids from council estates in Acton, South Acton Estate, and everyone just kind of mixed together. And that was amazing. So partly for me, through my family, which is a mix of all different people in my family, and the school I went to and the area I grew up in, what I think I learned so much was I have a little bit of all that in me. And the way I'm able to navigate my life and work now is that I can get on with someone from a middle class upbringing. I can get on with someone from a council estate, from a lower income family, because there's a little bit of all of that in me. And I think that is a massive privilege, actually, to be able to understand people and be able to find some commonality with most people. So yeah, happy education. My dad particularly was really big on hard work. Traditional Caribbean man, so I had to go to Saturday school. When all my friends were playing football, Saturday I had to go and do more maths, which I hated for at the time, but I understand it now. Many car journeys, listen to Jeff Shreves and Choice FM and Daddy Ernie in the car on the way to Saturday school. So big on education, big on respect and hard work. And being polite, being a man of your word, showing up on time, integrity, hard work, all that sort of stuff. You know, my dad never took a sick day off work, not one. So that's a kind of, you know, upbringing. But at the same time, he was also quite liberal in terms of me making my own mistakes. So he'd let me, you know, go out to clubs when I was 16, have fun, experience life. And that was a great grounding. So I went to University of Roehampton, did marketing. After that, I started a band. So my big passion is music. I'm a bass player.
Oh, right, okay.
Hence MusicFootballFatherhood.
Oh, right, I was going to ask for that, yeah.
So at university, I was the resident DJ. Started producing music, making music. And then from there, I met my wife in a band. And my career started from there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So at what point did you go into social work? Because I think you did some youth work and social work as well. How did you go from marketing, a marketing degree, into
So after university, I applied for jobs, and I guess at that time I didn't have any clue about what I was up against in regards to how the world works. So I finished university and applied for hundreds of jobs, marketing jobs, and literally had like no response. Right. No one responded at all. Now I think back and look, I went to my university wasn't a Russell Group university. I had no work experience in that field. Young black guy, trying to get into these marketing roles up against people who knew someone, went to a great university, had some work experience. I just had very little understanding about the world of work, really. And so couldn't get a job. My mum worked in NatWest, and she said, Elliot, why don't you like apply for a job? So I did. And I guess this is where the system works for you, right? Because she was able to get me an interview. I got the job. I didn't know when she said, come and work in NatWest, I'll be working literally sitting next to her in the back. So for the first 2 weeks training, I was next to my mum. I was on my best behaviour. Yes, sir. How can I help you, miss? So that was an experience. And then they realised and they moved me to another branch to do my training in Kingsbury, Northwest London. And I worked there for a couple of years, but I loved music. Right? That is that and football are my core passions. So I was making music. I was working with members of the So Solid crew, doing grime, DJing on the radio, pirate radio, and I also had a passion for young people and communicating. So I left NatWest, took out a £5,000 loan, and started a social enterprise called Make It Happen Music. And incredible, going into schools, going into youth clubs, working with housing associations, and teaching young people how to produce music. But that was the gateway into the conversations. Actually, the real essence of the workshops was talking to the young people about gang violence and drugs and weed and relationships and consent, friendship, having conversations with these young people who were in quite deprived areas of London. It was incredible. The conversation we would have, the connections, the experiences that we would go through together, like life changing for both of us. So I did that for a few years until the coalition government came in 2010. Mm-hmm. And overnight they pretty much cut funding for all of that sort of work. So that work was funded through schools who would apply for funding from government and initiatives. The coalition government cut all that sort of stuff. So when the riots happened in 2011 in London, for me and for other people who were doing the youth work, it wasn't necessarily a surprise, because the riots, yes, they were in response to Mark Duggan being killed in Tottenham, but the underlying feeling of we have nothing, and what we had has been taken away, and we're being forgotten, and we're lost. I saw that because the young people that I was working with, when the funding got taken away, they did nothing. They had nothing to do. Mm-hmm. And so I completely understood. I didn't say I agree with it, but I understood why that was happening, why that backlash was happening. So from there, I needed to make some money. I don't know what to do, so I started temping in the civil service. I went through a temp agency called Manpower. Okay. And they put me in loads of different jobs. I was doing stuff in a Marks and Spencer's warehouse in White City. They had me in a media firm, kind of being a runner with the tapes and stuff like that, just doing loads of different admin jobs. And then I got a job as a PA in the Department for Work and Pensions. Okay. That's where my business degree helped. And then that's where I kind of started in this kind of corporate world, and stayed in the civil service for about 10 years or so. Okay.
Now, I also know that you had the next chapter of your life after what you just told us about was characterized by a traumatic experience, becoming a dad, and it's kind of well documented. I mean, you've appeared on several podcasts and all that and spoken about it, but for the benefit of those who've never heard you, do you mind just sharing that experience, with us, and how the birth of your daughter kind of made you basically re-pivot?
So at the time I was in the civil service, so I had joined as a temp, and I was lucky enough to move around to different departments. So I was a PA in the Department for Work and Pensions, and then I moved into a kind of people role, got promoted into the Department for Transport. Over my 10-year career, went from being a PA to head of diversity delivery in the Treasury. So one of the most senior black people in the Treasury. And it was a really interesting experience, actually, in terms of doing people-based jobs and HR and change jobs in a large organization, dealing with senior leaders as my key stakeholders, just understanding how decisions are made, how leadership works. Incredible experience that I'm so grateful for, and I definitely take that into my work. But while I was in the civil service, in the Department for Transport, became a dad 8 years ago now. My daughter's 8 years old. And it was interesting for me because doing work around HR and change and people and family and gender, but then for me to have this actual real life experience at the same time. So when my daughter was born, she had an infection called Group B strep. And for those that know about the infection, it's very serious. 1 in 10 babies will pass away from the infection. 1 in 14 will have a very serious lifelong disability. So when she was born, she was grey, lifeless. They put her on my wife's chest and she didn't cry. They took her off, took her to the corner of the room, tried to resuscitate her, used a straw to suck the fluid out of her throat and her airwaves. At the same time, my wife is bleeding out very, very heavily. And I remember at the time feeling a sense of numbness, disbelief, feeling like I was watching a TV program. Like this can't be happening. Like this can't be our life, and just that sense of hopelessness and relying on people that I had met literally a few hours ago, hoping they can save my family's life. So we went into the neonatal intensive care unit with my daughter, and my wife stayed to get treatment in the delivery room. And I remember going through these white walls in the hospital, and I'm not the sort of person that I have a great relationship with my parents, don't get me wrong. But, I'm not the sort of guy that's just going to call my mum randomly. But in that moment, I just wanted to call my mum. And I think I was back in a kind of childhood state of just wanting to just want to call my mum and just, just my mum, what should I do, sort of thing. But there was no reception in the hospital, so I couldn't call her. So I went into the neonatal intensive care unit, and this nurse kind of looked at me and was like, you need to come into the room. I was in shock. You need to come back to us. Come in the room. You're a dad. You need to be with us. And that was really helpful, actually, because I was definitely in a state of shock, and I needed that. I needed someone to pull me in and back to the world. So I went into this side room. So for those who have been into the neonatal intensive care unit, you'll know that every morning there's a private room that all the parents go into. And they go into that room waiting for their private appointment to see their children and get a one-to-one kind of a conversation with the doctor in private in the intensive care unit. So I was in this room, probably like the size of here, and there's maybe 10 different couples, and they're all there because their children are in intensive care. And what was happening in that room was so special because those parents, spoke a lot of love and support into me. They told me about my responsibility as a parent, but they were kind. They let me cry, and they were really, really there in regards to we're all in this together. And sometimes when I drive past that hospital, it's Princess Alexandra in Harlow. I drive past that hospital and just think, wow, in that room this morning, there would have been that same conversation happening. It's just incredible what people experience every day that we don't see because we're not in that room, but amazing things happen in those spaces. So we spent two weeks in neonatal intensive care unit, ups and downs. We finally got the good news that the infection had gone and the antibiotics were working. But then my daughter developed a bump on the back of her head. And that's when the doctors got very serious. They were very concerned. They were talking about, all these different diagnoses and eventualities. We were booked in for an MRI scan the next day. We prayed and cried for the results to be good. There was a midwife called Nagme, came and prayed with us. We are Christian people. We prayed. We let it all out. We said, God, this is up to you now. I don't have anything left. We were knackered, right? 2 weeks of just no sleep, worrying. So we did the MRI scan, went back into the room, waited for the results, and the nurse came in, gave us a massive hug. It's bone structure. don't worry about it. You can go home. Fantastic news. We stayed for a couple of days. As the UK has it, we get 2 weeks paternity leave.
Yeah.
Paternity leave was finished. So we went home for a couple of days. I went back to work.
Back to reality.
Back to reality. So at this point, I'm kind of middle management level. I chair meetings. I chair away days. I do speaking in my job. I have a team. Went back into that, but I'm a shell of myself. We're trying to come to terms with what just happened, the most traumatic experience of our lives, and it feels like the world hasn't stopped. We just get back into it. So I started having panic attacks. I'd be crying. I'd be having insomnia. My wife was diagnosed with postnatal anxiety. There were so many times I'd come home from work and she's like, packing her bag, trying to go for a walk at 6 p.m. in the evening. Eventually, I was diagnosed with PTSD, which was a shock because I thought that was something that happened to like war veterans. I didn't know that you could get PTSD from other things. So that was a massive shock, but I was quite happy to get the diagnosis because then I understood what was happening to me. Basically, this trauma that I hadn't processed lives with you. And I think it is important when we go through traumatic experiences, especially as men, when we don't talk about it, to recognize the impact that has on our brains, whether we like it or not, no matter how strong we think we are or claim to be. When we go through trauma, that will have an impact on our brains. And it will influence how we think and how we behave and how we see the world and how we see ourselves. And those memories will replay in our minds, and it will shape the way we think about our interactions and our emotions and whatnot. So my symptoms were PTSD, and I was happy to get that diagnosis. So I started to write about being a parent. I think that's the one thing I probably could control, was this little small blog that I had going on. I called it MusicFootballFatherhood, and that was 7 years ago. And since then, it's turned into a platform that's supported thousands of dads across the UK through different means. So my wife says, your mess is your message. I don't know if that quote is from her.
Yeah.
But it's probably not. But she says that. I heard it from her first. And for me, I think that's definitely the case. Right. The reason I'm sitting here is because we went through that experience. But I'm grateful for it. My daughter's great. She's fine. Very healthy. But I'm grateful for that experience because that shaped my life completely, professionally and personally from that point.
So at what stage did you begin to realize that there was a community of people out there whose experiences resonated with what you had gone through? Because you've almost sort of found your tribe, or your tribe has found you, and now you go around corporates talking about or helping companies to create safe spaces for conversations like this to be had. Because, traditionally, men are seen or supposed to be seen to be masculine and stronger and, shouldn't really be seen to display their emotions and stuff like that. But traumatic experiences do have an impact on people's mental health, and you've chosen to become an advocate for people like that, people whose lived experiences are traumatic. And like I said, it's probably not the coolest thing to talk about because it almost suggests that men are like fragile, or some men are not as, are probably maybe effeminate or whatever it is. But these are real conversations that need to be had. Yeah. How did this message, get out there, and how did people sort of find you?
Do you know what? I believe in purpose, and I think this genuinely is what I'm here to do. I think sometimes we try things and you're pushing against a wall or a door and it's closed, and it's really hard to open that door. For me, in this work, the doors have been opened for me. It hasn't. Even though I've worked very hard, and there's been lots of iterations of Music Football Fatherhood, and lots of late nights, and lots of work in you know, making a documentary and writing a book, those things are hard work, but the doors have definitely been open. And I believe when you find your purpose in life, and everyone has one, when you're open enough to follow it, you know, God will do certain things, the universe will do certain things, and the world will open for you. So for me, I would say the point when I started writing that blog, and I remember reaching out to a couple of dads and saying, do you want to contribute? And they were like, yeah. So they started writing about their fatherhood experiences. And this was very early on. This is maybe 3 or 4 months after I'd started the blog. So back in 2016. And then what happened, you know, we were doing that for about a year or so. I taught myself how to do some light coding, built a website, and we started just generally writing articles about fatherhood. We brought in music and football in that to try and make it interesting. And then there was one day, me and my wife both had a day off work, and we were in a coffee shop in Harrow, and I was writing about being a dad, being a black dad. At the time I was working compressed hours. I had my daughter every Friday. I would go to baby groups and be the only man and be the only black person. And it was a bit, you know, people look at you like you've got two heads. What are you doing here? Are you an alien? And it was just an interesting experience. It didn't put me off, but it was just interesting. So I reflected on that, and I wrote this kind of this article. And my wife said, you should send that to the Independent. I found the editor's email address on Twitter. So at this point, I'd never written for the media. I didn't know anything about that kind of world at all. So in this coffee shop, she sends the article to this editor that she finds. They respond back straight away and say, we love it. Can we publish it? Can I have a picture? I sent a picture. By the time I got home from the coffee shop, it was on the front page of the Independent. And by the time I'd woke up the next day, it had been shared 20,000 times. So it went viral at the time in 2016, 17. And that was incredible, because I think what that did was take this idea, this concept, or something that just me and a couple of people were doing, to now being a thing. And so many men kind of reached out to me and said, I want to contribute, I want to be part of the team. And a lot of those guys are still involved now, you know, like Michelle and Alec and Sam and Kalai. You know, loads of people who are, you know, involved now and still contribute and still part of it now. A lot of it came from that article that went viral. And then a couple of months later, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, had a baby. And he posted on Instagram a picture of him and his baby, and he's reflected on childbirth and his experience of watching childbirth. And that same editor said to me, Elliott, like, do you want to respond to this? And I was like, okay, cool. So I wrote a little piece, didn't think anything of it. They published it on the Independent, fine. The next day I woke up and my phone battery was low. I had loads of missed calls. I'm like, what have I done? Have I upset someone? Like, what is going on? Why is everyone phoning me? I opened my phone, and Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, had seen the article and shared it and wrote some nice words on his Twitter. He has like 8 gazillion followers, billion followers, whatever. And so that was incredible, right? Having that recognition from The Rock. So that just amplified what we were doing even more so. And when I say that doors have been opened, it's things like that I could not have imagined. And that's happened over the last 6 years, 7 years. Things that you couldn't even write down as things that you'd want to happen or could imagine have happened. And I think it is because, you know, talking about these things around male vulnerability, men's mental health, fatherhood, parenting out loud, they are real life experiences for most people. I don't think I've ever met a man, whether they are super open to it or not, of talking about it. I have never met someone who hasn't been through challenges in their life, right? It's just the human experience. So whether we're open about it or not, there's something that happens when we see someone sharing stories and creating spaces for others to share their stories. We recognize that in ourselves. We recognize our own challenges. We see there is space and power for men to actually say, no, just because I may talk about a challenge in my life does not make me weak at all. Alexander Usyk, the undisputed world champion boxer, the other day broke down in a post-match conference after beating Tyson Fury because he misses his dad. His dad passed away. This is potentially, maybe undisputed, you would say, the toughest man in the world. Yeah. I would not call him a weak man at all. I'm a very strong person. I'm a very strong person. I'm very resilient. I'm very ambitious. But at the same time, I just recognize that life isn't a smooth sail. And actually, we will go through ups and downs. That's fine. We need to be able to navigate those difficult times. 3 out of 4 suicides are men. But 1 in 5 men have no close friends. And so there's something in this idea of success and this idea of strength that I think we've got wrong. And this idea that you can't talk about your challenges, it doesn't end up well. So creating spaces for men to be able to say, actually, you know what? I've had a traumatic birth experience, or, I'm going through a divorce. It's a bit difficult, or I've lost my job, or I've been diagnosed with cancer, whatever it is. And let's have a conversation about it. Peer support is incredible. Talking is not the whole solution, depending on your challenge, but it is a big part of what helps. Of course, we do need solutions. We do sometimes need clinical support, all those sort of things too. But having friendship, having peer support, having community, knowing there are other people who you can lean on, who you can swap stories with, like that solves a lot of problems. And I think people recognize that. Hence why, for me, in doing my work, the door I feel like has been opened.
Yeah. So for somebody who's watching this, who's probably new to parenting or has been a parent for quite a while, what signs or what things should they look out for as signs of post-traumatic stress disorder or a poor state of mental health? Because sometimes you might be going through something, but you don't want to verbalize it, just for the fear of appearing, weak. What are some of the things that people could look out for?
Yeah. So I'll start with the risk factors. So as a dad, 1 in 10 dads experience some symptoms of postnatal depression in their child's first 6 months. It's actually 1 in 5 for mums. So this is big statistics. This is common. You're more at risk if there's one of 3 things. So if you've previously had mental health challenges, then you're more at risk of having mental health challenges when you become a new dad. If your partner is diagnosed or has postnatal depression themselves, then you're more likely as a man to also, be at risk of higher chance of challenges. Or if there's a traumatic or adverse birth experience, which is quite common. There was a birth trauma inquiry done in Parliament through the APPG by Make Birth Better, that organisation, and stories of birth trauma, for mums and dads, prevalent. The amount of emergency C-sections, the amount of just issues during birth is actually more common than not. And then you have miscarriage and stillbirth and whatnot. So those are the risk factors. When it comes to what does postnatal depression look like for men, this is interesting because there are some common symptoms that are not necessarily based on gender, they're just in general. And that is what we'd recognize as what depression could look like, which is like low mood, isolating from friends and family, being quite quiet and withdrawing from social situations. Those kind of things that we might recognize as depression and low mood and that sort of stuff. But in men, we also find that men are more likely to overwork, which I probably did, delve into work late. If you've got a work colleague that's in the office at 7-8 o'clock and you're like, mate, you haven't got that much work to do.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a sign they're trying to avoidance. Risk taking, driving without a seatbelt, crossing the road and not maybe paying attention, doing things that are dangerous activities, that can be a sign. Substance abuse, taking drugs, drinking more, that can be a real sign too. So, and men are more likely to display those signs. But interestingly, there's an amazing advert, you may have seen it, by Norwich Football Club. Have you seen that advert? It's a campaign around mental health with 2 men. Yeah. And, you think that the guy who's kind of looks low You think he's going to be the one that maybe is not there at the end, but actually it's the other guy. It's the guy who looks normal, and that's the powerful campaign, because what it's showing is that postnatal depression and suicidal ideation can look like nothing at all. It can look like how I am looking now, and it can look like how you are looking. There are so many videos, and Calm did a campaign around this, campaign against living miserably, where it was the last moments from men before they took their own life, and they were happy, they were smiling, they were the life of the party, they were playing with their children. Some may say it's because they've finally accepted what they're going to do, that they feel a sense of relief, but it can look like nothing at all. It can look like normal behavior. And that is potentially one of the biggest issues that we face, is that if you have a broken leg, I can pretty much see you've got a broken leg. You're going to be limping. You're going to be in pain. When you have serious depression, when you have suicidal ideation, you may present very well. And what I've realized, and what I did, is that we are very, very good at putting on a brave face. As humans, we are experts at showing the world our smiles and laughter, and playing up to social cues, and maybe being who people would expect us to be. But inside, we're really struggling, and I definitely did that. You know, I came to work for the most part, I think, and pretended. So I say that to say that I think it's really important to not only have these conversations when we see someone in crisis mode, but actually for community groups and for workplaces and for friendship groups to maintain a healthy level of conversation about how we are doing and our well-being, you know, and making sure that we are actively thinking about how we're feeling, but also communicating that as well, and asking that from other people, because it's not so easy to tell when someone's really down, you know, especially as men, we hide it very, very well. And so when I'm doing my corporate stuff around men's mental health, it's that message really, that you may not know. So make sure you're creating a workplace culture that allows a level of vulnerability from their staff on a regular basis. So we do a couple of things through Music Football Fatherhood. That's more like the non-profit arm of the organization. You know, we work and partner with football clubs. The best team in the world, Queen's Park Rangers. If there's any QPR fans listening, probably not. But we partner with football clubs. We've worked with QPR, Arsenal, Southampton, Leicester, Watford, Brentford, Crystal Palace. So many clubs to do events called Extra Time, where we create spaces in football clubs for dads. They get a stadium tour, lunch, conversation. They're incredible. We do monthly online group therapy for dads as well. We have a blog with hundreds of articles from different men. So we do, it's all about open conversations about fatherhood. Incredible. But we also do, and I lead on this work with corporates, work with some of the biggest brands across the biggest industries in law, pharmaceutical, banking, retail, to help them have conversations about fatherhood, parenting out loud, supporting working dads, redefining masculinity, recruiting new male allies, and also men's mental health. You know, do that through workshops, keynotes, men's listening sessions, senior leader round tables, all that work. And it's incredible. Feel very privileged and blessed to be able to do the work that I do.
You've also written a book. Dad from Music, Football and Fatherhood. Untold Stories of Fatherhood, Love, Mental Health and Masculinity. Very interesting book, which came out a few years ago. Very well written book. And this actually led to you presenting a documentary on the BBC.
Yeah.
So just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the story behind the book is interesting. You know, we had the idea in 2019, approached publishers, and they were all like, we love the idea, we love the concept, but you know, no one knows who you are. You're not famous, so no one's going to buy the book, even though they loved it themselves. Yeah. Like, how does that work? So not taking no for an answer, we decided to self-publish. I met a lady called Stacey, who worked in publishing. She knew how to get a hardback book published and curated and into the stores, W.H. Smith and Waterstones and whatnot. So I followed her advice. We needed some money. So did a crowdfunder. Within a week, we'd raised £10,000. Within 12 days, we'd raised £12,500. And that was all the confirmation I needed to know that the book was needed and people would buy it. So we worked on the book. We published. Within a week, it was an Amazon bestseller. It's been used to influence government policy in regards to how they spend money for peer groups in local areas. Some of the NHS trusts will use it to recommend for new dads as they go through the maternity pathway as expectant parents. And it's changed lives. You know, the amount of people and dads that have read the book and said, you know, it was a friend to me. It's a curation of 20 different stories from men who have written in a honest and vulnerable way. Like literally when I say that, we asked those men to write down things they hadn't told their wife, their deepest thoughts that they go to bed with. And they wrote them down. Stories from, you know, Alec Grant around losing his wife in childbirth, or Andy Kapadia, who him and his wife experienced multiple miscarriages, or Sam Draper, who's one of the first people in the UK to take shared parental leave, or Ronaldo, who grew up in northwest London, a tough area, largely without the presence of his own father, and then becoming a dad himself and having to navigate fatherhood without that kind of model and role model that he had growing up. Incredible stories. Gay fatherhood, black fatherhood, being a single dad, childbirth trauma, postnatal depression, faith in fatherhood. Incredible stories. So the book ended up somehow in the BBC staff room one day. A guy called Zach read the book on his lunch break. He found my details on Instagram, messaged me and said, Elliott, I'm from the BBC. I want you to present a documentary about your life and work. And I was like, are you joking? Who are you? This is a prank. It wasn't a prank. We met for lunch. We spoke and he proposed the idea for the documentary. We worked together on the treatment. He managed to get it approved from his senior producers and directors. And together, me, Zach and Costanza, we put together a documentary called Becoming Dad. Filmed it in the winter of 2021. And that was an experience, you know. I remember there was one guy who lived in Kent, somewhere in Kent. And he just had a baby. And I was going to his house. I'd never met him before. I was going to his house. And it's interesting because you walk in and you've got to build a rapport with people that you just met and come into their personal space at a vulnerable time with a new baby and ask them really deep questions about their mental health and about just what it's like, identity change. And so for me, it was a real eye-opener, I guess, in terms of, and a test, I would say, in regards to like building a rapport with someone straight away you've only just met and trying to make this a really good show, but also respect their privacy and you know, make sure I'm covering the topics in the right way. It was a tough thing to shoot, I think. A lot of it was about my personal experience and my work. My dad was in it, my wife was in it, my child was in it. So it was very, very personal. But also I wanted to reflect the issues in the right way. I felt a massive sense of responsibility to reflect the issues in a true manner where other campaigners and other people could see the documentary and say, yes, this is a true reflection of what we are looking at. And so there's lots of sleepless nights. And me and Zach had some big conversations, very robust conversations about how we're going to portray this in the right way. But Zach did an amazing job and the documentary was incredible. And it ended up being one of the most 20 watched documentaries on the BBC network, the whole BBC network, in 2022. It was shown on prime time on BBC One twice. They actually rerun it because it was doing so well. And it was up there with Louis Theroux, Mick Jagger's documentary that year. And it was massive. That led me to go on Loose Women, on Radio 1, on the news, you know, and just do loads of media, which was incredible for the book, but also, you know, the work that I do, the work of Music Football Fatherhood. And I would say that was a massive life-changing experience. I was in the civil service up until that point, and I had to make a decision about what I was doing. My work was picking up on the fatherhood and the music football fatherhood side of things. I was obviously a dad, sharing care with my wife because she works full time. She worked full time at the time as well. Had my full time job in the treasury. Something had to give. So in May 2021, I decided to hand in my resignation and took the leap into doing this work full time. Luckily, 3 years later, still doing it, and it's grown and grown and grown. Now I'm able to, travel the world. I was in Lithuania 2 weeks ago, working with Vinted over there and their leadership team. I'm going to Ireland next week to work with Apple. Tomorrow I'm going to Coventry to do a keynote for the National Day Nursery Association. We're working with football clubs across the world. We have a new Parenting Out Loud campaign, which we'll touch on. It's been incredible. And I would just say to everyone, if you've got something that you truly believe in and you're ready to take a personal sacrifice in regards to financial and time, because you believe in what you're doing so much, you're willing to take a sacrifice, not just for you, but for your family as well. When you leave your job, it's not just you, it's everyone in your family that's going to potentially suffer if it doesn't work out. But if you're willing to do that because you believe in what you're doing so strongly, then give it a go, because you might change the world, and some incredible things might happen.
Great. Elliott, what advice could you give to somebody who's watching, who's become a dad, and to a child who probably has some health challenges, or growth, issues or abnormalities or disabilities, if I can call it that way, because that's the lived experience of some people, and I suspect it's quite a hard thing to adjust to, because outwardly you've got to be seen to be showing this care and affection, but then deep down, you're probably going to be harboring thoughts about what future this child has in terms of their prospects, life expectancy, what their life could look like, in the future. And all these things, I guess, could weigh on their mental health.
Yeah. So I've spoken to many dads or many parents who have children with autism or ADHD, or children who have, severe physical disabilities or severe health issues. And, my respect for those parents is out of this world, because parenting on its own is tough. Let alone parenting as a single parent, or parenting as a parent with a child with additional needs. And talking to those parents, they really feel it, because they're not just parents, they're carers ultimately as well. And so the demands on their work, on their time, and the amount that they're able to work and when is impacted. Their sleep, their stress levels, their concerns, as you mentioned, their worries about the future, those things are sky high. So what I think is important, saying from someone who is not in that position, but from what I've seen, is I think it's especially for dads as well, that we need to make sure that we are looking out for ourselves as well. No doubt those parents, are doing an incredible job in parenting. We do that, right? We pour into our kids and we give them everything, rightly so, and we sacrifice for them. Sometimes we forget to think about ourselves. We forget to think about what is it that the things that we need to be our best, our happiest, our healthiest. And when we do that, we're able to actually be better parents to our children. There's this exercise that looks at different parts of our life, and different parts of the things that we need to do to maintain, good well-being. And there's a circle, you may have seen it. It's sleep, it's exercise, it's nutrition, it's friendship, it's purposeful work, And I always find that exercise to be a really interesting thing to do on a regular basis for everyone. And just to look at actually, where am I on, marking my circle on those different parts of the circle in 10, up to 10, where am I in each of those different things? So, nutrition I'm pretty good at right now. I'm pretty good at my exercise. I'm really bad at my sleep. I'm staying up way too late. I don't go to bed on time. It's terrible. Friendships, I'm doing okay, but I don't see my friends and I don't call them as much as I probably should. Purposeful work, yeah, great. So having a look at those things and saying, actually, what is it that I need to do and focus on a little bit more to make sure that I'm good. And I speak to so many dads who don't do that. You know, they're working. Maybe they're the breadwinner in their family. They're parenting. Their health is not great. Their nutrition's not great. They don't see their friends. And so when they go through challenges and particular hard times, whether it is an additional health challenge or a redundancy or some issue with their children, it can impact them even more, you know, because we haven't got that foundation. So I think it's for dads, I'm talking to dads especially here now, you know, try to find time to assess what our foundations look like, and where you can find the time to then input into those things. Do I need to get more sleep? Do I need to actually exercise a little bit more? Do I need to see my friends? Do I need to start a hobby that's going to fulfill me and my purpose? Do I need to sleep? Do I need to, whatever it is, trying to have a strong foundation, because life's waves will come and go. And if you have a child with additional needs, those waves will be a bit more regular and a bit more, you know, a lot more stronger. So having the real strong foundation, I think, is even more important for those parents. And it's easier said than done. I'm not sitting here saying it's easy to do. Of course, it's not easy when you're busy and you're stressed. But I would compel you to try and find some time to focus on how you can like really look after yourself.
Okay. Parenting out loud.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Parenting out loud. So you can see my smile on my face, right? So parenting out loud, it's a phrase I've been talking about for a few years now. It's when dads are loud and proud about their caring responsibilities at work. So I was going around like talking about it in my talks, and it kind of caught on. I was like, okay, maybe this is something. People like the phrase, right? We like a catchphrase. Yeah. And so in April this year, we actually launched an official Parenting Out Loud campaign, and we started with a billboard campaign across the TFL. So we had posters in Victoria, Waterloo, and Euston. Big yellow posters with Parenting Out Loud, when dads are loud and proud about their caring responsibilities at work. And it's taken off. You know, the aim of the campaign is really to encourage dads to be loud and proud and bring their parenting to work, but also encourage and support employers to build workplace cultures where dads are able to do that. Because we know there's a stigma. There's still a stigma about male caring. There's still a stigma for a dad to say, I need to leave at 3 p.m. to do the school pickup. There's still a stigma about dads taking any more than 2 weeks paternity leave. That stigma and judgment still exists. So we need to work with employers to help break that down and normalize male caring. It's really important. Dads that have a strong relationship with their children are happier and healthier. One of the blockers from having that strong relationship is work, is the lack of flexibility. Traditionally, men have been breadwinners and providers. I understand that. Now we are living in a new age where most households are dual income. We have remote working. So what is needed from us, from society and our family and our children, is for us to evolve with that too. But we need our workplaces to be able to support us in doing so. So it's really good for men. It's really good for women, for women's progression, for workplace gender equality. The vast majority of the gender pay gap is actually made up from the motherhood penalty. It's the way in which having a baby impacts a woman's career in a way it doesn't currently impact a man's career. The gender pay gap is twice as high for women over 40 than it is for women under 40, and that is for childcare responsibilities. So if we want to really lift women up and help women to progress in the workplace and go into senior roles, we need men to play their part and share childcare. It's also really good for children. Some research from the Fatherhood Institute and Leeds University shows that when there is positive, consistent, persistent paternal involvement, children have better outcomes in regards to education and behavior and resilience, especially up until the age of 5. So dads being there with their children and, reading to them, helping them with their maths homework, taking them out to the park on a regular basis, it's going to help that child. And we all want our children to have the best start in life. Some more research shows it's really, really good for employers as well. So many younger dads under the age of 35, expectant fathers or new fathers, they are making decisions based on where they work, not just on how much this company is going to pay me, but also how much this company is going to support my home life. Are they going to let me work flexibly? Is my manager going to be open to me working compressed hours? Can I leave to do the school run? Can I attend my child's sports day? Can I take paternity leave over the statutory 2 weeks? Young, mobile, talented, young people are making decisions based on those aspects just as much as they are salary. There's one Magic so-called law firm that I worked with last year. They said to me, Elliott, we are losing talented young people to what you would say lesser law firms that don't have the status, don't have that Magic Circle brand. They are losing people to those law firms, which was unheard of before, because they are offering better paternity leave and parental leave. They are offering better remote flexible working. So it's good for business, for retention and recruitment, to create cultures now where dads can be loud and proud about their caring responsibilities at work. There are barriers, cultural barriers, of course, line management barriers, policy barriers. So I work with organizations to help them to develop cultures that really support parents and support dads, especially through keynotes, through workshops, through senior leadership roundtables, men's listening sessions, all that work. And as I mentioned, with some of the biggest organizations across the UK, recognizable household brands that are realizing that this is a key priority and this is the way the world is going. And as an organization, it's about keeping up with society, not lagging behind, but being progressive in regards to where are we going? What does the makeup of family life look like? How has family and ideas about being a man and a dad evolved from when our parents were young? And what do we as an organization need to do to make sure that the people that work for us are supported in living those values that exist now? So yeah, Parenting Out Loud is a powerful campaign. Loads of dads have shared their stories on LinkedIn. It's been mentioned on Loose Women, discussed on Loose Women. It's been featured in Princess of Wales. Prince of Wales, right? Princess Kate. On her website, her royal foundation, there's an article about Parenting Out Loud on there. So yeah, it's had an incredible impact. We launched it at a company called CBRE, a property company. We had speakers from Microsoft and Apple, from Leicester City Football Club. We had Stella Creasy, the Walthamstow MP. We had Jolie Brearley from Pregnant and Screwed doing a keynote. So it was incredible. It supported from government to business. Yeah, it was really impactful.
Fantastic. Elliott, we have a tradition on this podcast where we give our guests the opportunity to dedicate their episodes that they feature on, to anyone or any group of people of their choice. So who would you, as we bring this to a close, who would you like to dedicate this episode to?
So I was thinking about this on the car on the way in. I was like, I think I want to dedicate it to it. And I did a post on LinkedIn this morning, actually, about the dads who have shared their stories on LinkedIn inspired by the Parenting Out Loud campaign. And I think I want to recognize those dads, actually.
Sure.
Dads who are going off on 4 months paternity leave and posting about it with a picture of their kids. Or one dad who put on his out of office on a Friday, I'm going with my son to get ice cream back on Monday. Or another dad who mentioned that he had a meeting with a new colleague. And before they got into the business, they just caught up quickly about how their sons are doing, 5 and 6 year old sons. And so they're posting publicly on LinkedIn. They're supporting the campaign. They're being role models. They're probably making a bigger change than they realize. And I'm so thankful that has been the outcome. I'm so happy with the media attention and all the stuff that's come from the Parenting Out Loud campaign. But actually, the thing I'm most happy about is the actual dads' behavior change and doing things differently. Because for me, that's how I know that the work is actually making a real life impact. It's changing things. It's not just a tagline. It's not just an idea. It's not just something that is people are retweeting and sharing on social media. People are actually doing things differently. And so I want to shout out all those dads who are Parenting Out Loud and being loud and proud about it on social media and in their workplaces.
Fantastic. Elliott, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd like you to like, comment, share and subscribe. And if you have any issues that might have been addressed in today's conversation, please feel free to reach out for help. It's not it's not shameful, to ask for help. There's nothing wrong with being vulnerable, because there is help out there, and there's no point suffering alone, because, with the help that Elliott and his team and other people provide, your journey into parenthood and fatherhood could be a lot more pleasurable. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And see you next week.
Take care.
Done.
Great. Enjoyed that.
Good. Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
I do have a question for you. So what's